reading skills. So if kids aren't getting language intervention who need it, those will be the kids who don't read or who will struggle with reading. And so we can't ignore it at those young ages. We also see that reading benchmarks, often the standards and milestones that we establish for research, are not based on the kids that we serve, the kids who are sitting in front of us. They're based on very different children. And the parental expectations also end up being problematic. And so there's a lot of expectation for how parents will behave in a school, for how they will interact with teachers, that is not based on the actual parental behavior of all parents and the way that parents will interact with kids. A lot of research talks about how parents should be child directed, that we should be having conversations with our children and all of that. That is cultural. My mother had no conversations with me. In fact, she said, stay out of grown folks' conversations. Go talk to the children, sit at the children's table. And so that was a um, cultural difference, and I'm fine. I'm good. So these standards really create disadvantages for kids to whom they don't apply. And there are so many kids to whom they don't apply. Next. So when we talk about language, which is what I'm going to talk about today, it's an important means of transmitting your culture um, and your cultural beliefs across generations. I was just talking to some of my colleagues about how some aspects of language, like pragmatics, which is the use of language in social context, is really directly transmitted culturally. Say please, say thank you. You don't get to call adults by their first names. You have to address people in this way. This is how you behave in this context. That is cultural. And there are real differences culturally in the way that that is transmitted. And so we need to pay attention to that. And so when kids are learning about language, we're always deconstructing language and talking about things like sentences and sounds, especially in reading intervention. We talk a lot about the elements of language and we don't talk about the overall point of language, which is what? Communication. The overall point of language is to be able to communicate, and that ability to communicate supports written language. So it's really important for us not to just think about language as grammar or sounds or sentences. It is an important method for kids to transmit their knowledge and for their families and speech communities to transmit cultural knowledge to them. Next. So across the world, there are lots of language varieties, and they have real impact on reading, writing, and spelling. And that's what actually my specialty. The varieties of English, for example, there are lots of them. Um, and so when the language variety at home differs significantly from the one that's taught at school, we often see kids having difficulty with language-based skills like reading, writing, and spelling. And I don't mean across languages. So you can speak English very differently, and you can speak within a language very differently, and that impacts reading just as much. And so it's important for us to pay attention to how kids are using language and use that to help teach reading, writing, and spelling. Next. So I'd like to talk about what the difference is between a language and dialect, because Esther said we just came from Ghana. And so when we were in Ghana, one of the speakers said something about dialects. And I was talking to this gentleman who took issue with it. We don't speak dialects, we speak a language. And I said, if you speak a language, you speak a dialect. Okay, so what's the difference between them? So, a language is a rule governed symbol system. And so, words are symbols, they represent specific actions, objects, or events. So, if I say the word truck, then you think about the object truck. So that word symbolizes an object. And language is innate. Unlike reading, you come to the earth, to the world, programmed for talking, for language. So we all are um, pre-wired to talk. And the only kids that we see who don't talk are kids who are language impaired. So you come into the world with a language center in your brain. The language center is already wired to accept language from people in your environment, and you learn to talk. That's different from reading, of course, which is taught. So you don't come into the world learning to read. When you see kids who learn to read without instruction, they usually have autism. So it's not typical to be able to read without being taught. Okay. So it's innate. It can be verbal, like me, or nonverbal, like this gentleman who's doing the interpreting. And so language can be verbal or nonverbal, and it's agreed upon by a community of speakers. That's really important. So the fact that you speak Swahili in Kenya is because you agree that this is the language in this community. In some communities in Kenya, they speak other languages. In the United States, our major language is English, but I live in California. And sometimes it's debatable whether the major language in California is English. I think it's Spanish, actually. I had someone say that to me once in Italy. Everybody in the United States speaks English. She said, "Oh, except California, they speak Spanish." And so that's where I live. And so, but it's agreed upon by the community of speakers. When I have students who speak Cuban Spanish or Mexican Spanish, it's because they come from a speech community that uses that language. So that's what a language is. A dialect has all the same characteristics, all of these. It's rule governed, represents, it's a symbol system, it's rule governed, it's innate, verbal, nonverbal, agreed upon by a community of speakers. And it varies within the language, has variation within the language adopted by speakers who share a community, ethnicity, or region. So you may speak Swahili, but if you live in a particular region, you likely speak it differently than the people in Nairobi do, or you speak it differently than they do in the community next to you, because in your community or your region, you use it differently. That is what a dialect is. If there are Next slide. Africa has more languages than any continent in the world. More than 2,000 languages, the most linguistically diverse continent in the world. If you have 2,000 languages, for every language, there are at least 3 dialects, maybe more. So we're talking about 6,000 dialects on this continent alone. It's the way you use language when you speak. The language that we use when we speak changes because of the speech community. When we're in writing, we expect it to look a particular way, and it may not change in writing, but as long as you're speaking it, it is changing based on use. We hear young people using words that we never used in the past. Technology is changing language. When we talk about a bite, we used to be talking about food, and now we have BYTE, which is talking about technology. And so all these words are introduced into the language through continued use. And so languages and dialects are important, and they both influence reading significantly. Next. So, this is my favorite definition of reading because this is the job of the child. So, we can talk about reading in all many complex ways, but this is the basic job of learning to read. Learning to read is coming to know how one's own writing system works. The child has knowledge of language already, because remember, you're already wired for language, and you spent the first few years of your life in a speech community that taught you how to use language the way we use language in our community. So you get to school, you have that knowledge already. It's expertise that kids bring to school. Have knowledge of language already. It's the writing system that must be learned. How the child's writing system encodes his or her language. So the child comes to school speaking, and when they get to school, they have to take what they know about oral language and encode it in writing because it's the same system in print. Reading is a language skill. It is a written language skill rather than an oral skill. And so, whatever you know about language when you show up at school is going to influence how you learn to read. And so, as teachers, we should be using the child's expertise to help them learn to read. Next. So, what do we know about reading development? Language is the foundation. Oral language is important for later reading development. And kids have literacy skills long before they come to school, even if they can't read. So, you might not be able to read a book, but if you can look at a road sign and say, and kids can from about the age of 2, that says stop, that's literacy. My kids knew the golden arches from McDonald's long before I wanted them to know them. I want to go to McDonald's. Why? Because they see the sign. That's considered literacy. It's environmental literacy. So that's the thing that kids learn before they get to books. Those symbols have meaning. Remember, that's all language is. It's a symbol that has meaning. Math is also considered a language. I was talking to Lucy Serrero about her son who codes. Coding is also a language. It's rule governed. It's not innate, but it's rule governed symbol system that is agreed upon by a community of coders. Okay? The light system, when traffic light system is also a language system. All of these are considered language without the innate piece, but the symbol system that has meaning that we all agree on. We all agree that red means stop, even if we don't stop. We all agree that green means go. And so that's considered a linguistic system. And so this understanding highlights the importance of considering kids' home literacy environments when they get to school. They know a lot already. Kids are not blank slates. They know so much when they walk through the door. But as teachers, we don't know how to capitalize on it. Next. What we do know about risk factors is the language reading link. If you have a language weakness when you come to school, you will have trouble learning to read. We do know that. Your language skills have to be strong. And one of the things, the lady from Tanzania, one of the things we see in kids with dyslexia is that many of them do have some real language strengths. In fact, it is one of the areas that has been identified as particularly strong in that group of kids, and yet they don't read. So having strong language skills is not enough to learn to read, but in order to learn to read, you have to have strong language skills. Okay? Go back. We also know that there are some real high risk populations, whether it's dyslexia or just difficulty with reading. When we talk about in ethnic and language minority kids, so you're using a different language system than the majority, immigrants and children from low income families are kids who are at high risk for having reading problems. And so we have to spend more time. It doesn't mean you won't read, it may mean that the path to reading is different for you. Next. Language, we talk a lot about the code, phonemic and phonological awareness. Put this slide in here because I listened to one of our preeminent speakers in the United States who studies reading and statistical knowledge and all these things. And he talked about the code and then he talked about language. So I put this in here to tell you that the code is language. Phonemes, phonology, all language. It's all language. It's just the building blocks of words, and words are language. So it is an artificial distinction. It's all language. Language skills drive reading skills. Next. But it's not unidirectional. So the impact of language is not just in the early years. That's something that people are really starting to study. Because I teach language development, and if you look at the years from 0 to 5, that's when the most language develops. But it doesn't stop in the early years. So what we have learned is that early language development drives early reading development. So from about 0, that's birth, to 8 years of age, the strength of your language skills will determine the strength of your reading skills. But then after age 8, it switches. And so then reading development drives language development. Once you learn to read, then your language skills will be strengthened by your ability to read. So you know so many things about so many things in the world because you can read. I know about the Great Pyramid of Giza. I have never been to Egypt, but I read about it in a book. So I know some things about the world because I can read. And so my language, my vocabulary gets stronger because I can read. So the relationship between language and reading is not unidirectional. They support each other. This is a bi-directional process. Reading and language are reciprocal. They happen together. They're going in parallel, and they continue to support each other throughout our lives. When we see adults who don't read well, we also see weaker language skills because they haven't their language skills, oral language skills haven't gotten stronger by reading. And so we do see that in people who are struggling to read. Not all children with dyslexia struggle with language, but all children with dyslexia have to have strong language skills in order to support reading. How do you develop language skills? You can develop it in a classroom. You need to talk to kids. They develop them by interacting orally with adults in their environment, by listening, and ultimately they will read. But they also need the strong language skills going into the reading process. Next. I like this study. I added it because it was an important study. Montag and McDonald in 2015 wanted to know this relationship between um, how language and reading influence each other in older kids was what they were looking at. And what they did was they looked at some transcripts of adult talk and they coded it for complex language. They were really interested in relative clauses. So I saw the man who went to the store. I saw the girl that was next door. That's a relative clause. So they looked at these passive relative clauses in adult speech, and then they looked at children's storybooks. And what they learned was that the relative clause occurs 3 times more likely in a children's book than it does in adult speech. So adults aren't using relative clauses very much when they talk, but books are using them a lot. And so what they learned from that was that kids are learning this complex language skill from reading, not just from talking. And so written language exposure is an important source of linguistic experience if you're going to develop adult-like language skills. Next. It's one of my favorite studies. So when we talk about language variation in reading, keep going. The impact of cultural language is strong. We see this link between your home language, between classroom English, and between academic English. And so when I talk about speech communities, I'm usually talking about what kids bring to school. When you show up at school, that's a completely new speech community. So that's the classroom English. That's different. When you start reading and writing, that's academic language. And that is even different, the language they're using in the classroom. And for some kids, it's very different from the language they are using at home. And so, in addition to learning academic English, which we talk about all the time, these kids have to learn classroom English, the vocabulary, in order to learn to read. So, kids are doing a lot of work when they show up at school. This is not easy. Next. So, the impact of cultural language is that children who speak different varieties are coming to school trying to reconcile the differences between the language they use at home and the one they're encountering in text. That's a real metacognitive load. That takes a lot of work. But you know what? Kids can do it if we let them. That's really important. Adults interfere a lot by trying to change what kids are doing to match what you think they should be doing, and instead of allowing them to take what they already know to support something new. Um, Probably it was before the pandemic. My life is now split between after the pandemic and before the pandemic. And so before the pandemic, I was in South Africa in a rural community, and we were working with kids and teaching them how to we were working on oral language. The camp was focused on self efficacy for college. We want you to learn some of the skills. We're going to take you to the college campus, and we want to see you go there and get higher education. And so my role as a speech pathologist was to come up with something for oral language. So the kids did speeches, and I taught them how to talk to an audience. I'm looking at you, I'm using my hands, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing this, all these things. So at the end of this camp, we said, all right, now we're going to have a competition. We're going to give you a speech. You have to memorize it. Get up in front of the group and use all the skills we taught you to do this speech. And what the other kids were learning was how to give constructive criticism. So, how to talk to somebody about what they were doing well and what they weren't. But it was a competition, so not everybody had to participate. So, the first girl who asked to be involved said, I want to do it. And she stood up, put her hands in front of, looked at the group, and then she looked at me and said, I need to do it in my language first. Is that okay? I said, sure. She did the whole speech in Sapati first. And then she looked at me and said, now I am ready. And then she did it in English perfectly. So she needed her own home language to support what she was trying to do in this language that we were teaching her in school, which was the classroom English. Every child needs whatever language they know, the cultural language that they have learned in their speech communities, in their homes, to support them as readers and writers when they get to school. Otherwise, what we are asking you to do is to come to school, learn arguably the hardest thing you're going to learn in school, which is to read, and to do it in a language you have never seen before, that nobody has ever spoken to you in before, nobody has that you've never had to think in before. That is too hard. We call that a cognitive load. It's a cognitive burden. It's a real burden for kids. And so what we ask instead, we're starting to talk about translanguaging, and the idea of translanguaging outside of like bilingual context actually was raised in South Africa by Leketi Makalela at the University of Witwatersrand. So he talks about allowing kids access to their entire linguistic repertoire. Everything you know about language, you get to use in order to learn this new task. I am not going to say you cannot use Zulu when you're figuring things out. You cannot use this. You need to be able to use your own language system. Next. So, the mismatch hypothesis, I'm not going to talk about a lot, but there's this mismatch between text and the way that kids speak that makes reading hard. Next. We did this study in 2015 where we were trying to test the mismatch hypothesis. One of my colleagues, Mark Seidenberg, who is the last author up here, builds computational models. So they're statistical models that test ideas. And I said, can we test the mismatch hypothesis? So we did. So we gave this theoretical model spelling and oral language that either matched or didn't match. When it matched, it took the model 350 trials to get to 75% accuracy. So it had to practice 350 times, and then it finally got it and was able to recognize it every time. When the oral system and the written system didn't match, the model needed more than 1,000 trials to get to 75% accuracy. So it needed to be exposed to it more. It needed to have more practice. It needed to have more opportunity to engage with the language and text in order to learn how to read. We know that this is true for kids who speak different dialects and different languages. It's also true for kids who are dyslexic. More time, more opportunity to engage with text, more practice to engage with text. One of the things we see in our classrooms, I don't know if it's like this in Africa, I'll say to a teacher, or in Kenya specifically, I'll say to a teacher, how much reading do you do in your classroom? And so we have these blocks in the classroom, they call them reading blocks. So the teacher will say to me, I have very proudly, I have a 2-hour reading block. And I'll say, that's great, but that's not reading, that's reading instruction. So when do the kids actually get to read? How much time do they get to read in your classroom? And the answer, not much. You have to read in order to be a reader. Good speakers speak, good writers write, good readers read. So kids have to have practice with reading. Next. I talk about dialect and dialect density. I'm not going to go into this a lot because I know that I need to quit. But high dialect, we talk about dialect density. So kids who use a lot of variation from print. So there are some kids who may use some of their features of their speech community, but not a lot, and some that sound really different from the language of the classroom. What we have learned is further away, next one, please. The further away that a child is, next slide. The further away, it's called linguistic distance. The further away you are from the language of the classroom, the more work you have to do to become a reader. So when we see kids who are coming from very different language backgrounds, they will learn to read, but they need more time, more opportunity, more practice with text in order to do it. So kids need to be reading, 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 reading. Whatever the text is that you can handle, you need to be reading in order to become a good reader. So we talk about the distance. Next. It impacts reading, writing, and spelling. Every language based task. I have a colleague in my lab now who's studying in mathematics. She also believes that it impacts mathematics because mathematics is a language and we use language to transmit mathematical knowledge. Next, you can keep going. Next, next. Okay. So, the important question for us is what's our role in supporting kids who use different languages, use a lot of dialect when we're talking about teaching them to read? Is it to change what they're doing or to change what we're doing? And I'm here to say it's to change what we're doing. That we need to let kids take what they know to support what they're trying to learn and not treat them like blank slates that we just have to make over. When children show up in school, they know a lot. Even if it doesn't match what the school is doing, they still know a lot. And so the important thing is for us to figure out what they know and use it to teach them new things. And so we should focus on teaching kids adapting our instructional practices to better align with what kids are doing in school. This professor that I was talking about in South Africa, uh, Dr. Makalela, he had a group of kids who spoke 6 different languages in his classroom. And so in order to test this idea that kids need to use their own language to support learning, he gave them a problem to solve. And he said, now split yourselves into groups and solve the problem. And he watched them split themselves into groups. What do you think they used to split themselves into groups? Languages. They Whoever spoke Zulu was here, whoever spoke Xhosa was here. They all naturally organized themselves into language groups in order to solve a complex problem because they needed their own language to solve the problem. Then time is up. Come back to the class, to the front. Now tell me what the answer was to the problem. What language do you think they gave the answer in? English. They gave it in English. They needed to use their own language to support the problem solving, but then they were able to come back and talk about the problem in English. And so what he says is one language is incomplete without the other. If I don't allow you to use whatever language you know to support problems in the classroom, like reading, I will complicate that process for you and make it more likely that you won't learn the skill. And that's really important for us to consider. Next and last slide. So I think it's the last one. Do they need to learn to assimilate to the language of school? You have to know the language of instruction. You have to. The problem is how we get there. Do we have kids walk into the classroom and say, cut it out? We only speak English here, or do we allow kids to use what they know to make the transition to the language of the classroom? And it's the latter. And we're trying to teach them to read. We're not trying to change their language. We're trying to teach them to read. And if they need it, we need to let them use it. I don't think that's the last one. Next. So we need to balance respect with academic success. And I mean linguistic respect. Next. I know what the last one looks like. So it's about a question of being fair with linguistics. In our country, we focus a lot on second language learners. So if you speak Spanish and English, we know you're going to have trouble learning to read in English if you're only a Spanish speaker. So we spend a lot of time on that. What we don't spend a lot of time on is dialect speakers. They're having as much trouble with reading as the second language learners are because they are also having to deal with a language difference. Next, 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 next. Translanguaging in the classroom. This is that idea, full linguistic repertoire. Extended text exposure. You need more exposure to text when you're talking about cultural language and when you're talking about dyslexia. You need to build awareness about the language varieties. That's called metalinguistic awareness. And the kids are doing it themselves. They're doing it just by being allowed to. You have to honor the way that kids solve problems and create linguistic bridges for them. Next and last. Nope, back. This is the last one. We need to preserve kids' home language. We have to minimize correcting them. What happens when you correct a child in front of the class over and over again when they're reading? They don't want to read anymore and they stop taking chances. We see kids really proud of getting up in front of the class and reading and wanting to show what they know. And then the teacher starts correcting them when they start pronouncing things. And then the kids get less and less confidence. And then they don't want to do it anymore. And the next time you call on them, they do not want to read because you have broken their spirit. We can minimize correction. If one kid is doing something a certain way, I promise you the rest of the class is too. And so add it to your lesson. Don't correct kids in front of the class. And we have to reject these deficit perspectives because it makes kids reticent to read, to write, to do anything. And we have to create linguistically affirming classrooms that support academic achievement, but also kids' cultural linguistic skills and their identities, that those things are just as important as academic skill. Because if kids don't have that kind of confidence about who they are and they're not supported in the classroom, we don't see them learning the same way. And they lose interest in learning. They lose interest in school and we start losing them. And so it's really important for us as teachers to affirm what kids know and to support it. Next. Thank you. I don't know if I'm allowed to have time for questions. It's up to Esther. Yes. Do you have any questions?
Oh, okay, great.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
My name is Nicholas, and I'm dyslexic youth, and I'm also an advocate. So my question is: do uh, gluten and sugar affect the brain? How you read, or
Gluten and sugar affect the brain, but I don't know if they affect the ability to read. I know there are a lot of myths about what causes dyslexia, and I think that's probably one of them. People have talked about color, they have talked about all kinds of things. Now, one of the things, I don't know if we're talking about that at this conference, because the people here are so knowledgeable, I assume we are, is that there are a lot of comorbidities with dyslexia. So that means other things that you see occurring at the same time. So a lot of kids who have dyslexia also have attention deficits and hyperactivity. They may also have difficulty with executive function, which is like self regulation and sort of controlling yourself. A lot of those things, and those things can be influenced by your diet. And so, reading itself, no. Gluten and sugar, no. But if you have a child who's very hyper and all he eats is chocolate, I promise you that's not a good idea. And so some of the other comorbid things that we see happen with dyslexia may be influenced by your diet, but there is no scientific evidence to show that gluten or sugar will influence whether you are a reader or not.
Hi, my name is Karen Muriuki. I work in two organizations. One is Differently Talented Society of Kenya, and I also work as in an edtech organization that is based in Tanzania, known as Ubongo, and I also happen to be autistic. My question is the area of how can we enhance edtech to enhance learning among dyslexic students? I feel this is an area that I'm very passionate about. And I found that there's some very big gaps in EdTech and how it can enhance inclusive learning to dyslexic learners and those with other intellectual and learning disabilities.
I'm glad you brought up ed tech because the last speaker before me said something about speech to text. And those technologies are very popular, but as someone who studies language variation and language differences, they're not very good with people who speak other languages or dialects. If you have an accent or if you speak a different variety of a language, they're really inaccurate. We hear kids in the classroom saying, "That's not what I said. I said this. No, I got that one right." And they said it was wrong. And so some of that technology is not very good, speech to text at least, because of weird science. So the people that those um, that kind of software is normed on are people who don't have the same accent, who don't speak the same language, who don't have the same kinds of pitch and intonation. And so it's when it's applied to kids who do have it, it's really inaccurate. It's really important in Kenya as you are developing assessments, as you are developing ed tech, that you make sure it reflects you as a country, as a continent, as a people. Don't be bringing stuff over here from Britain and giving it to your kids and then wondering why they don't do well. Because you're not British. That's why. And so the same is true with ed tech. There are some things out there that are really helpful, like some obvious things. Like if you have difficulty with writing, you'd be a lot better off with a tablet or a computer that eliminates this handwriting issue. So there are some obvious pieces of ed tech that work really well. Speech to text is not one of them. I have a student actually who's studying that now. And when we look at it with African American kids who speak English but speak a different variety of English, it's less than 50% accurate. It's more like 30 to 40% accurate. So some of the technology is not well developed yet. And when it's not developed for speakers in this context. And so you have to make sure that you're developing some of your own things. It's one of the things I like about Kisei, honestly, is that a lot of the things they can't get, they develop. And so, as you're thinking about developing technology for the Kenyan context, create your own. Don't take things that people are using and then be surprised when they don't learn them, when it doesn't work well. We're doing that now where we see kids who are Black kids who are taking tests and they score so poorly. And yet we know they have those skills. The issue is not the skills, it's the test that's used to assess the skills. And so I'm working on new assessment instruments. I'm all about that, all about making sure that the instruments that we are using, including ed tech, reflect the competence of kids and not just their ability to perform on that instrument. Ed tech is the same way. So there are some things obviously you can use. You can develop your own software. You can use tablets. You can use computers, you can use all kinds of things, but anything that involves the use of oral language, you need to develop here. That's a mistake that we made. Now we are doing this retrofitting where we are looking at things, they do not work. We need to develop something different. Develop from the beginning and don't have to go back. That's my advice.
My name is Caroline.
Hi,
I
Caroline.
am a parent, and this is not necessarily a question to you. It is an acknowledgement and something that the educators in the room who were educated like me in schools where translanguaging was demonized. And now, after your presentation, I'm like, what? You should
Yes.
have made me read.
Yup.
And I'm like, okay, this is a social norm that has to start transforming to help our kids. So the educators in the room, please don't give people montos for speaking their language.
Yes. But the thing about it, Caroline, as a teacher, this is not just a shift in practice, it's a mindset shift. And that's what you're describing. People have to change their views about these things before they actually work. When I first went into rural classrooms and was listening to teachers in English medium classes in South Africa teach, and they would say things in English and then they would say them in Zulu, and they were mixing it all up, and I'm standing there all judgmental with my notepad. Oh my God, she doesn't speak English well enough to be teaching in an English medium classroom. If the kids are going to learn English, she needs to speak English. That was me. Then I asked her, why do you keep switching back and forth between languages? Because if the she said, if the concept that I'm teaching is hard, kids need to learn it in their own language and not be so focused on English that they can't learn the concept. So she taught those concepts in Zulu first, and then she switched to English later. And I threw my notepad away and started paying attention to the way she was teaching, that it makes so much sense. We did this in the United States recently with kids who are fourth, fifth, and sixth grade. So they're like 9 to 12 years of age. And they were really good oral language users, but they weren't getting past word reading. They didn't understand what they were reading in text. So we went into the schools. This was in Oakland, California. We went into the schools and said, okay, this is the relationship between what you do with oral language and this is reading. First of all, the kids didn't understand that what they were seeing on paper was actually oral language on paper. And so first they made the connection between what they were saying and what they were seeing. Then we said, while you're learning to do this, you can use language any way you need to in order to support what you're doing. We did this for 8 weeks and we saw kids make really significant change just because we didn't say, no, 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 you can't do it that way. You have to do it this way. We want you to read at the end of it all. And if you need to use your own oral language system to support reading, you should. And Heather and I talked about this. One of the things this little girl said to us first was, I didn't know that's what reading was supposed to sound like. It's like, yes, this is what it should sound like if you're actually reading and understanding what you read. You shouldn't be reading, this is a cat. At the end of all that, you're not really understanding. If I allow you to use your oral language to support that, once you've learned those decoding skills, then you can read and understand what you're reading. And that's what we were focused on, reading comprehension. And it wasn't until we made the connection between oral language and reading that kids were starting to comprehend what they were reading. That is translanguaging. So for one, you have to show people that it works. And I know in a context like this, and we see it in Spanish speaking kids where teachers are like, no, no Spanish in the classroom, no Spanish, no Spanish, no Spanish, only English. And the kids are traumatized by that. And it makes it makes learning to read and learning the concepts in the classroom slower. It takes them a lot longer if you don't allow them to support what they're doing with what they already know. And that is a mindset shift. And I know it is in this country, it is in our country, it is everywhere. But it's a mindset shift that's worth making. I don't know if I get to decide who speaks next.
Okay, that's going to be our last question so that we're able to save on time
Yeah,
as
because
well.
we're running
But we
out
can
of
always
time.
have these
I'm sorry.
conversations right after, if that's okay. Go ahead.
Before, when you're traveling with lesson, were you doing the lens? Is the lens? Is the lens? For me to be able to do the lens. So I thought of getting a feedback. And then I realized the sequence are not beats for me because those are the things for the other left. Yes. Yes, you're right. The sequence that we buy are manufactured out there, programmed in window. Yep. Like that, the municipality wants that. So for concepting, planning to do someone within technology like that, and system program get help for I think that's really important that if you're talking about using something like these pens, they are not only programmed often for English, it's what we call general American English. It's not the English that people speak, it's the English of, what do we say, government, education, and journalism. So, like our moderator, she got it going on with English. That's not the way we always hear people speak English. She does it because she's in the news arena. And so there's a particular kind of English in that context. And so kids who don't speak that English also have trouble. But if you are using things that are designed for English speakers or other languages that don't include Swahili, develop your own. Kise is a treasure You can actually do that in this country. It's not something that we see a lot. Actually, I've never seen anything like this. I talk about Kisei a lot, actually. When I say, you should see what they're doing in Kenya. They have this place. It's called Kenya Institute for Dyslexia, and they're doing this. And the thing that I like the most is that you're developing your own things. If you need ed tech, Kisei should be developing the ed tech for you.
Okay, a round of applause for our professor. I think she's done an exceptional job. Fantastic. It's okay. Keep clapping until she gets all the way down. Thank you so much, Professor Julie. We have learned so much. Two things for me. One, as a millennial, clearly I need to go for therapy because that month of business was just the ghetto. Yo, it was just it. Was it not? It was bad. Yet somehow here we are. And working for one of the biggest media houses in East and Central Africa, Royal Media Services, you'll understand we have 13 radio stations. And out of two, one that is Swahili, the other one is English that I happen to work in, all the others are vernacular. And when young people come to me and say, oh my God, Cynthia, I want to do this, I want to do that, I tell them, my voice is very agile, ladies and gentlemen. I will keep it for a while. Yeah? It's going to be here for a minute, so I'm not going anywhere. But the guys over there in vernacular, you will learn a lot more. You can do a lot more. And if that is what we need to do so that our students and our teachers and our young learners can be able to understand this language easier and communicate better and understand and learn, then I really do not see what the problem is. Because there's an entire career out of learning your own mother tongue, isn't it? A round of applause for the professor. She's done an exceptional job. And we're going to move now a little bit faster, and we're going to introduce our first panel. And this panel is a very high policy dialogue on building an exclusive future for dyslexic or neurodivergent learners. Now, this is where we bridge the gap between ideas and action. This, of course, is going to be moderated by Dr. Purity Ngina, MBS. And allow me to read her bio as she makes her way. Ms. Purity, Daktari Purity Ngina is a commission secretary and chief executive officer of the National Gender and Equality Commission, NGEC. She is celebrated as the youngest PhD holder in biomathematics in Kenya, earning her doctorate from Strathmore University at just 28 years old. Now you can clap. That is where you are clapping. Thank you. With over a decade of leadership and advocacy experience, Dr. Ngina has worked extensively in education, policy, social change, holding previous roles in Zizi Afrique Foundation, Strathmore University, and as a high school teacher and mentor. She has authored research papers, policy briefs, and thought leadership pieces spanning education, disease modeling, and 21st century skills, and has personally mentored students in over 200 schools in across Kenya. Ladies and gentlemen, Daktari Purity Ngina. Hi, people. Thank you. And of course, allow me to introduce her panel. Our panel has Daktari Lynette, and you'll allow me to just head over to her bio as well. Dr. Lynette Ongera. She is the coordinator of research and innovation at the Kenya Institute of Special Education based in Nairobi, Kenya. She also chairs the Institute Gender Mainstreaming Committee. She holds a PhD in education, special needs education from Kenyatta University, and a master's degree in professional studies, emotional and behavioral difficulties from the University of Birmingham, UK. Ladies and gentlemen, Daktari Lynette Ongera. A round of applause as she makes her way as well. And from there, we have Miss Grace Okoth. Miss Grace Okoth, or Madame Grace Okoth, holds a diploma in special needs education, a degree in special needs education and counseling, and she is the Deputy Director of Education, Ministry of Education, Directorate of Special Needs Education. Ladies and gentlemen, Madam Grace Okoth, as she makes her way, a round of applause as well. And Also on the panel, we have Dr. Peter Kenyua. He is a seasoned educationist and a curriculum specialist. He has a wealth of experience in curriculum development in the area of special needs and disabilities from early childhood, primary, secondary, tertiary level. Additionally, he has expertise in development of curriculum support material in print and electronic formats for all learners. Dr. Kenya holds a Doctor of Philosophy degree in education, special needs education, a master's degree in educational psychology, and a Bachelor of Education degree in special needs education from Kenyatta University. Dr. Kenya has also attended several management courses, including risk management course, quality management course, result-oriented management program, and strategic leadership development program. Dr. Kenya is accredited counselor with Kenya Counseling and Psychological Association. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Peter Kenya. And finally, on that panel, we have our last panelist. This is Dr. Sylvia Mochabo. Dr. Sylvia Mochabo is a renowned neurodiversity and disability inclusion advocate, founder and executive director of Andy Speaks for Special Needs Persons Africa, a neurodivergent individual and caregiver to 2 children with neurodevelopmental disabilities. Dr. Mochabo brings powerful blend of lived experience, policy expertise, and program innovation to the conversation on inclusive education and support systems across Africa. Our work spans across advocacy, therapy access, public policy influence, awareness creation, inclusive publishing, and corporate neuro inclusion training. He leads pioneering initiatives such as Neuro Mainstreaming Program, Nexus Therapy Centers, Ride for Autism Africa, and the Neuro Caravan Outreach Project, all of which champion early intervention, equality, and systemic change for neurodivergent communities. Daktari is also the force behind a Kinsley Publishers, an inclusive publishing platform that produces accessible, culturally relatable books rooted in lived experiences of neurodivergent individuals and their families. Ladies and gentlemen, Daktari Muchabo, and that is your panel.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'll just say a few things before we can go to the panel question. First, to the professor, Asante Sana. Asante is thank you. Because I remember when the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development started working on the design for indigenous languages, most of us were like, why are we teaching our children our mother tongue in school? And I know Peter is still a contentious topic, but happily we now have designs up to, I think, all the levels for indigenous languages and in different areas. Then you choose the language to fit that. Of course, then someone like me will start asking, I'm married to a different community. So all those things will play. But I took home the mindset shift that people have to start appreciating the power we have in our local languages. When I was told to speak to this panel, first is that we held a consultative meeting and I'll look at the issues that we discussed. And these issues were raised by people in the policymakers. We including had the director from special education. We had representation from KISE. We had parents. And I'll read the challenges before we go to the question. But one of the things every year before we finish the 844, we normally receive results from the minister or the cabinet secretary of education, and he reads all the grades. And I have done analysis for the last 6 years. In 2024, we had 48,000 of our children getting a grade of E. So an E is where either you just write your name and that's it. And when you sit in this conversation, we never go back to ask ourselves, could this be the children who have learning
disability. I don't think anybody has gone back, asked that question. Why our children in school for 8 years plus 4 years and 2 years in the pre-primary, and yet they get a grade of E? Is it that because they have learning disability? I don't think I have an answer, because I'm a researcher, but I've not researched on it. And I've not had people speak about that grade. Of course, we keep on saying they will become better, they can thrive, which is true. But did we lose them along the way? Last year, but one, we also had 48,174. The other year, 2022, we had 30,000. 2020, 28,000. 2019, 29,000. It's always a big number, but we never go back to ask ourselves. And I think I'm happy, Esther, because of this conversation that we have started, because it will help us as researchers to go back and ask ourselves, these children that are in school, and yet when you look at the learning outcomes, or what we read in the newspaper that our children are in school and not learning, could there be the fact that either they have learning difficulties, they have disability, they have challenges that people need to appreciate? The government spokesperson, Commissioner Mwaura, Commissioner Nzomo, Esther, and other colleagues, it's an honor for me to be chairing this session. I will just go to the problems that were raised, and then we can go to the policy discussion. So one of the issues that were raised in terms of when you look at the space of disability, especially for learning disability, and I'm raising this so that you have this in mind, is that we have limited understanding of what is dyslexia. I don't think all of us in this room really understand it the way probably Esther, you understand the problem. And so there's room for us to keep on speaking about it in terms of looking at how it is perceived, it is understood, and also the issue that Honorable Maura was raising, that we are running away from appreciating that this is probably how we need to be defined or how we need to be perceived. And those contentions issues might be barriers to even getting support, either from government or from stakeholders. The other one was lack of awareness and sensitization. I can't say that enough. Gaps in NIMI's data collection. It was raised that the government data does not capture whether you have this learning disability or not, and that is a policy issue. And I'm happy we have members from government. Inadequate support in public school, that was raised, that the teachers, the children are not in the special school, they're integrated in our curriculum, in our space, the public schools, but the teachers probably have not had support. Special needs education training, motivations. The teachers who train to be specialists in special needs, they just want to go to specific special needs school because they are going to get extra resources. However, if you send them to these other public schools, they no extra money, then they don't feel like they need to be there. And I think, Kise, you can speak to that. Limitation of state-based curriculum, where, and I think, Daktari, you can speak to that, especially because you have a child and you have the person from the curriculum. What does that mean? When you're told that if your child starts state-based, the process of going back to the mainstream might be tricky. Okay, it is possible, but tricky. So we need to look at that. Attitude barriers, confusion around assessment, outdated curriculum contents. I can defend Dr. Kenya in terms of curriculum because I've worked in the curriculum designs. We are still improving our new curriculum. Assistive technological device, gaps in teacher training, psychometric assessments, adoption of best practices. So these are the challenges that made this panel to come on stage. And I'm hoping that by the end of this conversation, we shall be able to address the challenges. One of the things is that sometimes when you're addressing issues of persons with disability or someone with a challenge, you think it will never get to your house. And then you become pregnant, you get a child, then the child has autism, has dyslexia. And then you realize I was doing this for myself. So as we engage in this conversation, thank you. I invite people to actually not to only think about policy for them, it is actually for our children. It might not be your own child, but sometimes it will end up being your own child. And some of us have gotten to that experience, and sometimes you are lost, you don't know what to do, but we are happy that these conversations are happening. I'll start with the policy makers, because I think the policy is where we are. And Grace, this is what I'm sure you do every day, to think about policy, to look at the policy gaps. What can you tell us about the policies that we have? Are they inclusive enough? Do you think that we are moving as a country in the right trajectory? And I know I've just changed the question, but it's the same question that I had sent you. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you so much. I want to say thank you so much. I don't know whether it's audible enough. Okay, thank you so much. Now, before I talk about the policy, because there are some issues here that have been raised, especially on the NAMIS. This is a system that the Ministry of Education has used for some time. And for those who do not know what NAMIS is in full, this one here, it is it is a national education management information system. And right now, it is being upgraded to CHEMIS. Now, this is where we have our data. I want to say that sometimes back, we had some challenges, and our learners with special needs and disabilities were not onboarded into the NAMIS. That is sometimes back. But right now, it has been configured. And if you get into the system, we have all the 11 categories of learners with special needs and disability. I'm talking about 11 categories of learners because those are the ones that are spelled into the sector policy. I know we have got the additional ones who are also recognized, but just within the scope of the policy, we have the 11. So when you get into the NAMIS, you will get it configured, and we have all of us onboarded. I think that one is a good information for all of us to consume. Now, I don't want to talk about time because this is the Ministry of Education. And most of the discussions that have been highlighted here talk about ministry, and education. So I hope we'll have good time to respond to most of them. Now, when it comes to policy, we all know about the Constitution of Kenya, and that is where we start discussing everything when it comes to matters policy. Now, the Constitution of Kenya 2010 places a strong emphasis on education as a fundamental right and the cornerstone of national development. Mheshimiwa, this is on Article 53, 1B, that talks about rights of children. When we talk about rights of children, the learners or students with specials and disabilities are not excluded. Everybody is onboarded. So rights of children, that means everybody is onboarded when it comes to education. And again, every child has the right to free and compulsory education. Every child. The problem that we have in Kenya, when we talk of every child, then there are some up to now are still hidden somewhere that we need to go back and we do some advocacy so that all of them are brought to school. Then again, we have the Persons of Disability Act. This is the latest of 2025, Section 20. Again, right to education, where we talk about inclusive education. The government must ensure that learning environment are inclusive, accommodating the diverse needs of learners with disability. And that is what we are doing as a government. Sometimes most of the parents continue complaining. Of course, we don't blame any person who complains because sometimes we are not aware of what is happening. But the Ministry of Education, of course, is really trying to embrace, through the schools that we have, to embrace inclusive education, to accommodate the diverse needs. The challenges is, can we identify or can we define what inclusive education is? How prepared are we as a country? Of course, Mheshimiwa talked about the negativity of everybody. If we don't blame the teachers, we don't blame the ministry, we don't blame our stakeholders. How prepared are we as a community to embrace inclusive education? Let us talk about the parents who are having these learners with special needs and disabilities, whichever category of disability. What about the others who have theirs? The normal in quotes. We say normal in quotes because all of us are not normal. Do they want their children to associate with these learners who are having these other disabilities? So that one calls for an advocacy. We need to bring all parents on board. Then what about the community at large? Are they ready to embrace these other learners? Because we want to take these children to the regular schools, not necessarily separating them from the others, but you want them onboarded to be taken to the regular schools. Do we accept our so-called regular children to associate with learners who are having these diverse needs? That is a food for thought. Then again, the government of Kenya supports services, that is, learners with disabilities are entitled to necessary support, such as assistive devices that we've been talking about, specialized teaching methods, and accessible materials. We have been talking about teacher training. All these ones here are very well explained under the Person with Disability Act 2025, where we talk about the support services, we talk about teacher training, we talk about non-discrimination, where no person with disability shall be denied admission to any educational institution on the basis of their disability. All these ones here, once we understand, we get into this policy framework, we read and we understand, then we shall know where our rights are and where the rights of our children are. Then again, we have the Basic Education Act of 2013, which is a landmark piece of legislation in Kenya that was enacted to give effect to the right of every child to free and compulsory education. You, as a parent within the country, how much do you know about the Basic Education 2013? And again, I want to challenge you as a parent. What is your responsibility as a parent when it comes to taking your child to school? The Act places a legal obligation on parents to enroll their children in a school and ensure they attend. Failure to do so can result to a fine or imprisonment. Do we know from where they are? Do we talk to them? Maybe that is why some of them are still hidden, or we have not reached out to talk to each and every parent from whichever corner of the country so that these children can be brought on board to be taken to school. We have resources being allocated to schools, and for us to give this child any resource, we shall only identify them when they are in the school, and when they are in the school is when this learner can be uploaded into the NEMIS that we talked about. So I'm just requesting that we work together. Advocacy here is the key. We work together, these children are brought to school, they are enrolled into the system where we can now get them reflected into the system for the resource to be allocated for these learners when they are in our schools. Then we also have, I'll just be skipping some others, sector policy for learners and trainees with disabilities. That is where we have the assessment and interventions through our EACs. I think later we shall talk about the EACs because we also offer training here in KISE for them. Then we also have teachers developing an individualized education plan for each child who is having a special need that needs extra attention. Then we have inclusive curriculum design and teacher training. Of course, we have a module in teacher training colleges where we have introduced inclusive education responding to your concern. Nowadays, when they leave the teacher training colleges, they leave when they have got at least a knowledge on inclusive education. Unlike before, when they could just leave without any knowledge, they go to our schools, they do not know how to support our learners. Our learners are not handled. Our learners are supported. So right now with that module, of course, the teachers, whenever they leave the college, they know how to support them. Apart from the teachers who specialize now, they come to KISE, they are now given a specific tool to go out and support specific category of learners with special needs. I want to stop there because of time, but I think later we shall still discuss more. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Grace, for sharing with us what the Ministry of Education is doing. And we can see the policy are there, but what probably I can pick is that they could be general policies speaking to children with disability. But parents, of course, and Grace, you can bear me witness. If my child has autism, I'm looking for a policy that probably is more granular. And I agree that you have to see the forest, but as a parent, I would want you to see the tree. And how then can we continuously work on our policies so that they become more inclusive, but also definition of what is inclusive. I want now to invite Dr. Kenya. You have, yes, isn't it? Yeah, you have heard from the ministry, seems like the policies are there. Is the curriculum, the competence-based curriculum that is supposed to support or to kind of borrow from the system, which is competence-based education and training, actually a reflection of what the policies are saying? Is it a reflection of our constitution? Does it take care of children with special needs and more so learning disability? And I know we don't have someone from Kenya National Examination Council, but I would want you to tie curriculum and assessment for children with dyslexia and learning disability. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. I hope I can be heard. Yeah, first of all, I would like to respond to one of the issues that were raised on the curriculum because we have two pathways. One of them is the age-based pathway in the CBE. The age-based pathway is where we have the learners without disabilities going through from PP1, pre-primary 1, all the way to grade 12. But still, under that age-based pathway, we have learners who can still follow that curriculum with some adaptation. As an example is learners with hearing impairment, the learners with visual impairments, the learners with physical impairments also. So what we do as a center or Institute of Curriculum Development, we develop the curriculum for the regular learners, and then we have to look at it and ensure that the learners with disabilities can be able to access it. That means we normally adapt that curriculum to suit the learners with special needs that can be able to follow the regular curriculum. And that we have done all the way from pre-primary 1 to grade 12. Then apart from the age-based pathway, we have what we call the stage-based pathway. It was born because of the realization that there were some learners that we were taking to special schools, and they were taking years before they leave that school. Sometimes if you go to those schools, you might find learners who are that years old, but they still go to that school. And then we had to look for ways of how these learners could be able to exit. So we came up with a curriculum which was addressing the specific needs of those learners, and the stage-based pathway normally takes care of learners with severe cerebral palsy, severe autism, the deaf blindness, and also those with severe intellectual disabilities. So the curriculum that we have made, one is for the self skills or the self-care, where they learn the activities of daily living. They also learn how to take care of themselves before they now acquire the other skills that might be required. And as they move from one level to the other, the Kenya National Examination Council normally offers assessment, of which we are able to determine whether the learner has been able to acquire the basic skills to move to the next level. And right now, the learners are supposed to move to the vocational level. And when they move to the vocational level, they might not be able to specialize in a whole skill area. And the skill area here, I mean, they might not be able to come up with a dress or a sweater or something that maybe could be made, but they can prepare part of it. So if they are able to come up with, or if they acquire skills of either acquiring the skills of making a part of that, then those learners can be exited from school so that they can be able to work with the others to produce something that is complete. An example, we might talk of crop farming. They might not be able to go prepare everything as far as tomatoes are concerned, but they can be able to prepare the seedings. If somebody specializes in that preparation of seedings, even if they left schools, they can still acquire or be able to move on with life with that skill. If there is another one that can be able now to go at the harvest and the package the same, then I know very well that those learners can now be able to take care of themselves and so on. And that is how our curriculum looks like, and the learners are likely to access it next year when they move to the vocational level. Now, about the curriculum, how have we been able to address the learners with dyslexia? We have, as you have been told by Madam Grace, that we have developed curriculum, the inclusive education module, of which all the teacher trainees attending the teacher training colleges have to undergo through that module. It will enable them to be able to identify the learners with special needs. And if they are there, then they will be able to assist them in one way or another, or refer them even for assessment. That's one thing. The other thing is that we have produced curriculum to train teachers who can be able to teach and also assist the learners with special needs. And that curriculum is being offered by the Kenya Institute of Special Education. And we have all the areas of specialization. The traditional areas, may I refer to them as so, the deaf, the visual, the physical impairments, and then we have also come to the other areas like emotional behavior disorders, communication disorders, language disorders, among the others. So those are some of the areas that the learners can be, or the trainees can be able to train on. And when you look at these learners, especially the learners with communication difficulties, the learners with emotional behavior difficulties, they are in our regular schools. And even the learners who are gifted and talented, they might be in special schools and also in regular schools. So when the teachers are prepared for the same, then they will be able to take care of these learners in their respective schools. And we are now emphasizing more on inclusion, because if we want these learners to fit into the society, then we need to prepare them for the skills that are required, and also they can be able to run together with the others. That's all what we have done as far as the curriculum is concerned. And then we are emphasizing more on differentiated learning, whereby the learners are going to learn according to their individual needs. And we have been telling the teachers that we shall stop teaching mathematics or teaching my class, but they go to class and they teach a learner so that they ensure that that learner has acquired the stated learning outcomes for that particular third or that learning area. Because teachers have been going to school, they go to class, they prepare to go and teach mathematics. So they teach mathematics a whole lesson, that 5 minutes they leave. But they have not taught the learners. But if they can be able now to go and teach individual learners according to their needs, then we sort of have moved on as a country. So that's something that we have been able to do as far as that one is concerned. We have also tried to come up with materials or the teachers' handbooks to assist the teachers to interpret the curriculum. We also have got the guides, and we also work with the different stakeholders to ensure that the materials that we produce are able to meet the needs of the society. There is the issue of the parents and so on. Under the CBC, we normally focus more on the parental empowerment and engagement. Previously, we were having the parental engagement, where you go to the parents and you tell them that we require this money, we require this, we require this. But we have never told them why that is required. And that means we needed to empower the parents. So we are having such activities And we could appeal even to the media houses to assist us, to empower the parents, to give them the information about the runners with special needs so that they can also be able to embrace them instead of hiding them. They can then be able to bring them out, take them for assessment, and then we see what can be done if they access schools. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kenya, for those insights. It shows there's progress, and the government is thinking about the children. But when you singled out, you didn't single out the children with disability with dyslexia. I had deaf, virtually impaired, and all the three groups. So I know when parents who are here might be wondering, is the government also mentioning? Because a mention is also very important. And I know you want to respond, which is not, maybe you didn't want to list all the groups. I'm assuming that even those with learning disability are taken care of, but you can clarify.
The runners with these learning disabilities are also being taken care of, especially when you look at the curriculum for teachers, the teacher training curriculum. We have a component of inclusive education. And under that inclusive education, we have all the categories of learners with special needs. And the learners with special needs also include the learners with learning disabilities, under which the learners with dyslexia are also considered. So the teachers can be able to identify those learners, and then they have been given steps on what to do in order to be able to assist these learners.
Thank you. I wanted you to clarify because we hear parents where they say a child who is probably visually impaired and a person with a learning disability, the support needed is very, very different. But I believe that with progress and with this conversation, people can appreciate, because someone who needs support to read, to comprehend, might require 30 minutes of the teacher, rather than someone who probably the barrier is that they can't see what the teacher is writing on the board. And speaking this because I know Sylvia, as a parent, is listening keenly. But let me go to Kenya Institute of Special Education. I'm going to give you my own experience as a parent with a child who has speech delay, which probably is mild autism. So when I started the journey, I came for assessments here. And then I went to assessment in hospital. And then I went to another place. And every day someone tells you, go to that place, go to that place, go to that place. And then you look at the mandate of KISE. Do you think us as parents bring our problems to where the problem should not be brought? Because I reflect and wonder whether I needed to actually come here, because the assessment was not in the education space, was first to identify what my child is suffering from. I would want you to speak to the mandate and to what really KISE does and what is expected to do, so that the parents who are here, the stakeholders, the people who interact with persons, with children or parents who have problems, they probably should not be frustrated, because if I'm frustrated here, then I attack the government and say that KISE is not helping me. But maybe it's not your mandate. Please speak to that.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And I would like to speak to the question that you have raised. And I will start from where Dr. Kinyua has stopped, saying that they have developed a curriculum for teacher training. And that curriculum that they have developed is the curriculum that we use here in KISE. And before I even say that, I would like to tell you that when you bring your child to probably the assessment center like KISE, you're not bringing your child to where they're not wanted. When you're taking your child to the teachers, you're not taking your child to where they're not wanted. KISE is the home of special needs education. And even schools in Kenya are open to special needs education from the policies that Madam Grace has spoken to. And therefore, at Kenya Institute of Special Education, we are mandated to do functional assessments. And I'm calling it functional assessment because that is assessment of disabilities. And we do assess all disabilities, and that is where we have this center where we are seated, where we cater for that. So therefore, functional assessment is one of our mandates. And another mandate is, thank you. And another mandate is capacity building. And in that capacity building, there is teacher training. And here in Kise, we train teachers in basically all known areas of disabilities. And probably I would like to say that when it comes to learners with dyslexia, they are catered for under learning disabilities, where learning disabilities has got three areas. That is reading difficulties, where dyslexia is taken care of, and then we have mathematics difficulties and writing difficulties. So among the areas of specialization that we train teachers in is learning disabilities. And we prepare teachers actually through the distance learning program, quite a number of teachers who we think can go to um, all the schools in Kenya where they can go and assist children who are experiencing difficulties like dyslexia. So we train teachers at the diploma level and at the certificate level. We have various certificates, and one of them is inclusive education. And inclusive education, that is where they learn how they can take care of learners who are experiencing difficulties, especially in learning. Apart from that, we also run a model inclusive school, which has got children with different disabilities learning alongside children who are regular. And it has got PP1 and PP2. And this is a model school where we model inclusive education. At the same time, where the teacher trainees who are taking training in KISA go there to practice whatever strategies that they have learned in school. Apart from that, we do research that informs policy, research that informs practice, like, for example, curriculum development and even assessment. That is assessment which is done by the Kenya National Examination Council. Alongside that, we are mandated to design, produce, maintain, repair, and even distribute specialized learning resources that are used by learners with disabilities to schools. So that is why the previous speakers have talked about the government building one of the largest factories here in the Institute, where we will be able to develop easily available, accessible, and affordable resources that can be accessed by parents so that learners can use, and among them will be learners with dyslexia. As I said earlier on, learners with dyslexia, because they experience reading difficulties, so we also develop materials, specialized learning materials that are used to support their learning in school. We have 11 mandates. Do you want me to speak to all of them? So among, okay. Oh yeah, I've summarized to the ones that I've talked about. There is training, there's functional assessment, there is research, and of course, I've talked about running a model inclusive school. I have talked about assistive devices. And okay, when we are talking about assistive devices, we talk about assistive devices and technology. Yeah. Thank you.
I think Lynette deserve Dr. Lynette Ongera deserve a clap because, mandates, sometimes the way they are defined and how you understand them and how Wanjiko is parents, teachers understand them. It sometimes has a bit of conflict. I'm going to go to the parent. We have had policy. Sometimes the policy and the practice and the implementation is normally a bit different. And I'm going to say something that we have been doing. And I'm happy that Esther knew that here we don't have persons with disability coming with using wheelchair, because if you had not checked, then I would be saying The policy is there, but this podium is not inclusive. It is, eh? Is behind the screen. Okay, perfect. So, but sometimes you find where you're speaking about inclusion, practice, and the policy, most of the time not being the same. And you're the parent with 2 children. First, congratulations for holding, I mean, she has 2 children. I'm sure you have seen what she has displayed, amazing things that she is doing. So I want you to speak to, do you think what they have said is a reflection of what you experience? What challenges are you experiencing? What do you think need to be done? Because I work for government myself and all of us here, and learning is very important for us, because even when we are saying we have policy, we are doing this, we would want also to go back and say, is there something we can do better? And I'm also happy that you've been working with the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development in ensuring that the curriculum also takes care, not only for your child, but also the children that um, uh, have some certain disabilities. So I would want you to speak to you as a parent, your lived experiences, the challenges you're facing, and what action do you think here, all of us, because we hold very critical spaces in government, we can do better. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just one point. Everyone knows me about 2 kids. I actually have 3 boys. But everyone knows the 2, and everyone relates to the autism side more because that's what I've been verbal about. But I think God can be funny, because it's like He gave me a cocktail of disabilities in my house. Yeah. I did not even know what dyslexia was. But that's what my firstborn, who's now 18, actually turned 19 2 weeks ago, had. But I had no idea. And like my fellow parent from Tanzania, the first reaction in our African culture is, why are you not understanding? And you think that beating them out of it is going to work. But one of the hardest decisions I had to make that I felt contributed to his challenges in learning was the fact that I was asked to decide. He was ambidextrous. He could use his right and left. And they forced them to make him a right-handed. And you can remember, this is something neurological, it comes from the brain. So we are forcing a child to be right-handed, yet his stronger side was. These are the heavy burdens that a parent carries out. And when I'm sitting and I'm seeing him writing his name, instead of writing Daniel, he was writing Bamil. So we were having an issue with the B's and the D's, the G's and the P's, and it did not make sense. But how does that relate to me as a parent when I'm being told he's not getting, he's performing a certain way? We have to go back to our pockets, pull aside that teacher and say, please, I'll pay you extra. Just let's look at this. It forced me to take him into a boarding school because of also the home environment, having had now 2 other children who are now on the autism spectrum with learning disabilities, epileptic, and like I said, it's a whole cocktail in my house. Yeah. So when I'm trying to also understand how to teach balance, and I'm going to a school where at the time, sadly, all the good news we're hearing is part of the advocacy that we've been doing in the past few years. But the challenge I'd like to pass forward is, yes, we're talking about right now. What about our children who are already far gone in the system? I sit at the KICD Academic Committee, and when I'm looking at the curriculum, I'm asking, and I've been questioning this for a long time, what are we preparing our children for? Beadwork? Tell me which machine cannot do beadwork right now, and expect my child to sell that same thing at the price of the market. That's competitive disadvantage, clearly. So we have to also see how we go back to empower our children who have already started the journey when the field was unfair. Let's call a spade a spade. Because right now I'm at a point where I have a teenager who's talented in music, but everywhere you go, pay extra because they have a disability. So am I having any other special income that says this is disability centric that will support all these extras that everybody is asking of me? Because on top of the therapies, the doctors, the medication, and even the education side is hard. You go to school, yeah, we'll take them. Term 1, I remember I broke down because of that when my child Andrew went to school, and you're being told he's not getting anything as a parent. But when I came here, you were very open, right? I can take him. I bought uniform. I'm happy he's settling. He's doing this. My greatest joy as a parent was he was now able to go to the toilet. But what is the head teacher telling me? He cannot move forward.
And when you receive that report and everything is cannot, and your faith is, even now, as much as I speak and I look very comfortable with it, every time I see my peers saying my child did this, is in this club, I'm like, that's where my baby would have been. Right? Had I gotten the support early, because if I compare the second and the third child, because I'm now more empowered and I've been able to fight my way through it, he's becoming better. He's now bilingual. He has better improvements because I'm an empowered parent. So as much as Ms. Grace, you were talking about a parent having a role, the community plays a role. If you accept me, accept my child, I will not hide them. If the education system ensures the door is welcome, and I'll not go back and I'll be told, I still get that even at high school level, like, we can't handle, come pick your child. Then what? I stop everything I'm doing, I go pick my child, we sit at home. Who are we helping? Right? I came to you, you're supposed to make me feel open. It's everywhere, in churches, in school, in hospitals, when you cannot afford and the doctor sends you off. To go to who? Where do you turn? So it feels most of the time in the journey that the whole system is against you. You're fighting for everything. Why can't all these policies actually be enacted? Why can't I be empowered to know if this person does this? I might not have the energy, but I have someone who can listen to me. I have someone I can hold accountable, not just the policies. Policies are good on paper, but if I go to the ground, if you look at the schools, the seclusion, we're talking about integration. Our teachers who are there who have not gone through this new curriculum we're talking about, able to handle my child. Because we're not in the early system, we're talking about the facts of realities that we are now in transition. Where are the places we're supposed to be taking them? That's the quagmire I'm at. I'm like, we have this learning challenge. We have been in school for what, 10 years? We still have fine motor issues. But when I'm taking him to that private space, and I'm saying, let's teach him how to use computers. Let's teach him how to type. When I'm in a general school, they're being taught computer, the basics. This is a mouse. My son can understand. He's a visual learner, right? He just cannot put his hand on paper. And that's where the difference is. What assistive devices are we giving them to give them the alternative, the AACC, alternative communication method? Otherwise, you're just being written off. This one cannot. You stay there. He'll be walking around. Yet I'm paying fees. I do not have to man the teachers to ensure that my child is part of the conversation in the classroom. I don't have to be the one to have to purchase, because that's what I've had to do. Purchase the assistive devices, give it to the school. As much as it's okay to make it communal, but remember, my child is not getting that attention. Of course, I know there is the teacher limitations, the student ratios, but let's be factual when we look at our classrooms. It's a dyslexic learner, right? But are they being given that accommodation? The truth is no. If we look at our curriculum, what actual accommodations do we have? As at now, we're speaking about now, not futuristic. It is not there. It is not there. When you're looking at how a kinetic learner learns, right? Because we're all learning different. How does a kinetic learner get involved in the classroom? Do we give them the break? The ones who have ADHD. Personally, I suffered in my transition going into a high school because I learned different. I was a very bright person. But when I went to high school, I went to Alliance and we are all competing. But my style was not that writing notes from beginning to the end. I'm more of an audiovisual learner. I could pass geography, biology, all illustration and designs. I could write, I could close my eyes. I would fail in other subjects because that's not my style of learning. But there was no one to talk to about that. So from an A student, I became last 10. Not that you do not want to, but you have to work 2 times harder. If I was given an alternative of the diction way of doing it, oh my God, everyone has a book, I don't. Because say it and I will speak it. My mind will be able to record it and all of that. But you see, we are not given that opportunity. When I was thinking of going to university, looking back at what I went through in the transition from primary to secondary, I did not want to go through it again. I actually had to defer some of my courses because now it became too complex for my head. I'm more of a creative, but I'm forced to do more of mathematics, things that were not aligning with what it is that I'm doing. So that personalized learning and adjustment so that someone can be able to meet their maximum potential, I think is the greatest gap that we have in the space. Let's move from just speaking and actioning and also following through to ensure that all we say is actually met. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Silvio, first for sharing and boldly still taking care of those children. I think you are an example of a good parent, because we have seen many other parents hide their children. But here you're going with them to the markets, you're taking them to school. But there's something that Dr. Kenyo said about parental engagement and involvement. I know we are concluding. And why I think is important, and maybe Dr. Kenyo can speak about it more, is that, as you said, long time was the parent being told. At least right now, even me, when I go to school and the teacher wants me to understand the learning outcomes, I said, no, I'm not interested. Can my child remove his shoes? Can he say he want to go to the toilet? Can he remove his sweater? That is what matters to me. But maybe I'm one of the parents who are empowered, also being a teacher. So I don't know, Dr. Kenya, you can speak to that as you give your closing remarks. I just want to give all the things that you can speak to, and then because I'm told people need to end. And the transition, and maybe the ministry, Grace, is the transition then the solution to what Grace is saying, the new pathway in terms of STEM, social sciences, and art? Do you think that then solve the problems, or do you think we are yet to address that problem? Because I can see the transition, maybe, I don't know, but is a question to the ministry. And if not, what solution are we working on? Because I believe there's something the ministry must be doing to address all the challenges we are facing. Lynette, you have listened to the parents. You have listened to us saying that the teacher education is the most important. The ministry has a module. She presented that they have trained 736 teachers. If we leave the training of teachers to non-state actors, they'll never finish, because we have in Kenya 400,000 teachers employed by government, if I'm not wrong. Do you think then there's something you can do in terms of training the teachers that are already in practice, the ones that are in training, and what are you doing? Because I believe you're doing something. When she finish, I won't come back. So thank you for listening to my panel.
Okay, thank you. There is the issue of the parental empowerment and engagement, of which in the CBE we have the component of the parental empowerment. And that's where I said previously we used to have the parents come to school to decide what needs to be done, or they are told. But nowadays they can be able to come and ask questions. What is it that these learners are learning? What is it that my learner is, or my child is able to do? So there is that empowerment. So that we normally prepare the teachers on what information to pass to the parents. We also always hold the community, or we normally have the sensitization of the community, where by most of the times we have the county dialogues where we have the community leaders, we discuss on the matters to do with education. And they are able to raise issues concerning the CBE, of which they have been responded to. And that's why when you look at the curriculum, previously we were not having the mathematics being done in senior school. But when we went out, the community saying that we require this mathematics, and then we had now to redo it and then bring it back. It means that whatever we are doing, we are also involving the community. The only issue that maybe you are asking is how can my child, or how would my child be able to move on? Currently, the new system, the current system, 844, the children have to pick the subjects and so on. But the CBE, we have different pathways where the runners can decide. If one is good in sports and so on, they can pursue that area. Those that are good in humanities, they pursue that area. Those that are good in sciences, they are also able to follow that same area of their interest and so on. I have talked about the retooling of teachers, of which it started about 2 weeks ago. It is still going on. We want to retool the teachers, those that we had trained before. What is the expectation of them as far as the CBE is concerned? And that one we are trying, and we shall be able to move on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kinyua. There's something that I want to stress on when it comes to the assessment. This is by NEC. I said as I was beginning that this is the Ministry of Education, this is the mother of all of us who are seated here. And when it comes to NEC doing the assessment, all along these learners are normally identified early enough. That communication should reach NEC before the assessment time reaches. What happens is, I can say it is a lapse from our schools, heads of institutions, and maybe the assessors. If this learner is not assessed in time and the communication to NEC does not reach in time, then NEC will not be able to provide the child with what the child needs. We were talking about speech to text. This one here is done by NEC, and I have seen when the communication was done in time. So they normally go out themselves and they also do their own assessment. Then they provide whatever is needed by a learner. This is now learner specific. So it happens, but now the lapse is on the other side. So I'm still requesting Esther, advocacy, 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 and not Esther alone, all of us, because we know where our country is and what our country does. All of us understand, of course, what dyslexia is. But again, there are so many things, the strategies that we need to do these learners to perform. When all these are done well, then all these learners can also thrive and show their true potential. We talk about early assessment and intervention done by the EACs or the assessors. Initially, we did not have enough assessors, but right now the Teacher Service Commission has deployed assessors across the country in each and every sub-county. The only thing that we need to do is to empower them. And now the training happens here in Kise for the functional educational assessment. That one is one thing that we need to encourage, and not even the EACs alone, not the assessors alone. It's also offered to the teachers. I think I'm right, Madam Lynette. The teachers who would like to do the assessment course, the functional, they're allowed to come over. And once it is done to them, they'll help us do the assessment and identification from the classroom level early enough for these learners to be assisted. That one happens. Of course, I talked about training of teachers that is now happening, that module, assisting us at school level. Then the teachers again are being retooled by KICD. Daktari is here and he can attest to that. Retooling is something that is being done to the teachers who did not do or who did not know what special needs education is. Even right now, some of us are in the field doing the retooling. So it's a process. Of course, we accept, but it's a process. Physical adaptations. The classrooms are also being adapted, not all, because Mheshimiwa, you can even attest to this. There's no day we shall say that resources are enough. And that is why we are bringing on board the partners to come and support us. Once you identify a challenge somewhere, kindly come over, support us, because we want learner-friendly or disability-friendly institutions. Where we are, we know this is Kise, and it embraces everything. But what about the other places? We are requesting all of us to just talk about disability friendliness where we are, because we need our learners to be embraced everywhere. The communities, we talked about it. The parents, churches, let us talk to them, or let us speak about disability. That is through creation of awareness, sensitization, school culture and leadership, even celebrating the diversity days. When you celebrate a child, it was said here in the morning, how do they feel? That self-esteem is raised. Now, I want to speak about the pathways. And on the pathways, of course, we know that now we are transitioning to senior school. And for the senior school, we know the category of learners. It's a long speech that I cannot give right now, but we know the category of learners who need to transition to senior school. And of course, they'll be taking the 3 pathways. Then we have this other group who take the stage-based pathway. We also have several learning areas that will be subjected to them when they go to the vocational level. So we need to start understanding it on the stage-based pathway and the age-based pathway as they move. Now, the stage-based pathway will be taking the 3 pathways as they get into the senior school. Then the other learners who have been taking the stage-based pathway will also be transitioning to vocational level once they are through with the pre-vocational level. On the stage-based pathway, when they transition to vocational pathway, they're having 44 learning areas that they'll have to choose whatever they like with assistance of the parents, while the others are also being guided on the 3 pathways that they are interested in, and their parents will have to guide them on what to do, of course, including the teachers and other people who are there to give them career guidance. I think because of time, of course, thank you, Esther, we can engage more and more and more on this. But the government is very much committed to supporting these learners, and we're requesting all of us to support the government also, because the government cannot work in a silo. I want to appreciate KISE because this one here is our hub. When we talk of inclusive education, we talk about assistive devices and technology. We see KISE as a hub for the Ministry of Education. And I think when we embrace everything, then we shall say we are good to go. Thank you.
I think we started talking about when a teacher knows better. Ladies and gentlemen, participants, when a teacher knows better, they can do better. So in KISE, we ensure that the teachers know well so that when they go out there, they do better. And what we do with the curriculum that we have been given by the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development is to ensure that we implement it fully. And therefore, we ensure that by the time the teachers leave their training here after 2 years, then they know better. Now, as we train teachers, Daktari, you asked, what are we doing to be able to reach more teachers? Initially, Kenya Institute of Special Education used to train teachers biannually, around 80 teachers. But from the year 2000, there was an expansion where we introduced open and distance learning education, where we are training more teachers through the distance learning program and also admitting teachers annually. And we have also worked with the Ministry of Education and expanded from admitting just around 84 teachers to around 145 every year. Those ones who are sponsored by the government, they come here to learn full time. And then we have the open and distance learning education, where we have school-based, where we train teachers during the school holidays. Every school holidays, like today is our last day of training for those ones who we are training right now. And we have over 2,000 teachers who are taking the same diploma course and other courses. And at the same time, we work with partners to train teachers in short courses to help them be able to help or assist learners achieve in classrooms. Like we have worked with the Commonwealth of Learning, we have worked with UNICEF, and we are still working with other partners to ensure that we have helped teachers to be able to get the necessary skills so that they can be able to identify those learners in class and be able to assist them so that they can achieve. At least we can say that our teachers in Kenya, they are not that badly off. At least they are not that badly off. They have been trained, they have the skills, and they are assisting these learners. And that is why some learners are able to, come out successful. And therefore, that is why Wangeshi Maina said, rather, she applauded the teachers when she was talking here. She said that it's the teachers who help her in school to be able to achieve. And I think those teachers are in the Kenyan system. And of course, they may have been trained by Kenya Institute of Special Education. So it's good to applaud KISE. And we are also opening more avenues of working with partners to reach more teachers so that we ensure that each school, public or private, has a teacher who has got knowledge and skills on how to assist learners, and more especially learners with dyslexia. Thank you.
Thank you. She wanted to say something, Sylvia. No, time is up.
Mine was just a comment to my fellow parents, just to a reminder also. First, from the information, the support that's there, the caregivers at the end of the day are the gatekeepers to every child's future. If a parent does not embrace, if a parent does not do something, then that child is doomed, quote unquote, for the rest of their life. The amount of effort that we give, we put, can only be supplemented by now the other carers through the journey of life. So for us parents, let us embrace our children for who they are and not the ones we expected them to be. And that is how we'll be able to change everything for the rest of their lives. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You can take our seats. Thank you. Thank you very much. A round of applause for our panel. They've done a great job. If there was something else that was coming after this, I would have said we just stand up, we dance at the small, and then we come back and sit down. But the good thing is, me, I'm hungry. When I'm hungry, you will go with my clock. So my hunger has said we go for lunch. So we go for lunch. Thank you. So I am begging thee, kindly, huge, humble request. Can we please be back here by 45? Can we do that? Because we really do have a lot. See, now my mother tongue, just the ancestors. So I do not have time, but we have so much to talk about, so much to discuss. All of us want to participate, but we really have to keep a time. Is that okay? So can we do that by 45? And I don't have to Korea, right? I really don't have to. Oh, fantastic. I love you guys. So see you again in 45 minutes, kindly. Yes, for lunch. So you're going to get meal cards. There'll be ladies at either of the doors giving out meal cards. So you need that meal card to check into the restaurant and have your food. Is that okay? Okay, let's get going. Thank you, guys. DJ, fanya ile kitu. Thank you. Do the thing.